Greetings and salutations. Welcome to Knife Chats with Tobias. I first showed this knife back in January as part of a video that was showing off quite a few new purchases, and this is the What-A-Knife by Camillus. And this is a particular one. There were actually 3 versions of this knife. This particular version is probably the most common of the 3. A second version of the What-A-Knife has a single blade. It just has the clip blade. And another version of it has the clip blade as well as a pin blade instead of the cap lifter screwdriver. But the most common one you're going to find is this particular version. Now, What-A-Knife TM, you see that it's got a trademark after it, is not a trademark of the Camillus Knife Company or Camillus Cutlery Company. Never was a Camillus Cutlery trademark. We'll get into what the Camillus trademark for this knife was in just a little bit. But What-A-Knife is a trademark of a company called What-A-Product Incorporated that was located in Scottsdale, Arizona from basically around 1997 to 2004. And they are better known for the What-A-Saw, which was a small hand saw that they made. Actually, I think they made 3 different versions of the saw, and it would be stamped What-A-Saw TM. I don't have a What-A-Saw. Might have to look into that. But like I said, there were 3 different versions of the What-A-Knife. And as I just mentioned, the What-A-Product Company was in business from around 1997 to 2004. I believe, or I suspect, that these knives were made sometime between 2000 and 2004. I don't know for certain. They might have also been, and some people like to say that there were parts knives made by Camillus. That is not the case. These knives were made by Camillus specifically for the What-A-Knife line from the What-A-Product Incorporated line of products. And there were actually 3 different versions of it. So it wasn't like Camillus ran out of cap lifters and decided to put in a pin blade or turn out a knife without a cap lifter and just go with a single version or a single bladed version of the knife. No, What-A-Product actually commissioned Camillus to make 3 different versions of the What-A-Knife. Now, the reason I suspect, sorry about that, I hit the camera and the overhead light. Not a good combination when you're trying to film. In any case, the reason I think these knives are post-2000 versus pre-2000 is because, well, these knives were produced off of a line of knives in the Camillus lineup. Camillus made a very similar knife, and this particular one is the only version of the knife that showed up in the Camillus line. Now, like I said, What-A-Knife had 3 different versions of this knife. The Camillus line of knives that actually began in 1996 only had 1 version of this knife, and it was known as the Workhorse. And, well, let's get into the Workhorse, which I do not have a version of. I only have the What-A-Knife, and where the Workhorse came from. Because while the version with the stainless steel handles that you see here showed up in 1996 in the Camillus line, this particular knife pattern has been in the Camillus lineup since probably before World War II. In fact, several knife companies had very similar knives to this, especially with the blade choices, but you could also find it with a pin blade and a clip blade. You also find them with a Spearmaster blade and can openers and all sorts of things. And like I said, all the way back to before World War II. Now, the knife is just 3 inches long, so it's just a small jackknife. Where it really became famous with Camillus was in the Camco line of knives by Camillus. And Camco, for those who are not familiar, was the economy line of knives that was produced by Camillus, and it was introduced in 1948. And this particular pattern of knife was used by Camco for a variety of advertising knives and also for novelty knives. Now, unfortunately, all I have are some pictures of the novelty knives and also the advertising knives that Camco made. But I do have a modern version of one of the novelty knives from Camillus or Camco, and that is the Lone Ranger Hi-Ho Silver. And you can see here, now this is by the Novelty Knife Company and was made in China. But if you see here, the size of the knife is pretty much identical once you get rid of the plastic covers or the celluloid covers on there. So, and also if you see the blade choices here, they're very similar. You've got the cap lifter screwdriver. You'll see that. And also the clip blade. And I'll show you something else in a minute with the clip blade. See, the clip blade is pretty much the same. And also of interest, I thought, was the way the clip blade nail nick is kind of hidden by the cap lifter screwdriver, and you see that is still happening in this knife. Now, I do have one Camco knife that is built on this frame, but when you look at it, you say, man, that does not look like it's built on that frame. And that is the space whistle knife, or whatever the spaceship knife that Camco came out with. And so many things look different on there, but if you look on the inside, you see that it is essentially the same knife. The only difference is you have this big plastic cover around there, so it's hard to tell that the knife is the same length and everything. But you have the cap lifter screwdriver, and in this case you have a spear master blade. But you still have the same half stop and everything else. So this frame was used and modified for a variety of knives in the world of advertising and also for novelty knives in the Camco lineup by Camillus. Now, obviously, when you look at the What-A-Knife, the first thing that comes to mind is it's got the same stainless steel covers that you find on the GI knives, or the milk knife, the demo knife, whatever you want to call it. I think it was the S1760 utility knife by Camillus. The difference being it's stamped What-A-Knife instead of US. But also, if you notice, the diamonds are not cut in as deep or anything else. So, but no doubt they are distant cousins of each other. But the What-A-Knife was not made specifically for the What-A product company. It was actually pulled right out of the line of knives that Camillus was using and just restamped What-A-Knife instead of what the Camillus knives were being stamped. And that was the Duratool line of knives. Now, the Duratool line of knives dates all the way back into, I believe, 1988, and the Duratool line would remain active. The trademark would remain active until May 16th, 2009, which was after the Camillus bankruptcy, and the last listed owner of the Duratool trademark was actually Acme United, the company that had bought Camillus. But the stainless steel versions of these knives, the ones with the metal covers or metal scales, did not show up until 1996. That's when the metal covered Duratool knives first showed up, and there were actually initially two knives in the stainless steel Duratool lineup. before then, the Duratool knives actually had the same Delrin covers that you would find on the Klein tool knives that were being made by Camillus. So if you notice, it's Delrin, but it's got a wood grain in there. And for the most part, the Duratool line of knives were the same knives that were showing up in the Klein tool line of knives, with a few exceptions. And one of the exceptions was this particular knife, which is the Barlow, the 51B Barlow. The B standing for Bale, which is interesting because at the time, Camillus was referring to the bale on their knives as a shackle. Earlier, in their factories, they would call the shackle a clevis. So the name for the bale, shackle, clevis, whatever you want to call it, changed over time. And this particular one, I believe, is let me look it up here. Yeah, this is the Camillus tang stamp that lasted up until around 1988. So this is a very early Duratool line of Camillus knives. And the difference between this and their typical Barlow is the fact that they added a bale to it, similar to what you see on the Klein tool knives. And if you notice, the coloration in the Delrin is different for the knives that were made for Camillus versus by Klein for Klein tool. This is a Klein tool made Camillus knife. But just about every knife that was in the Klein tool lineup of work knives also appeared in the Duratool lineup of knives for Camillus. And these continued to be made by Camillus right up until the end of the company in 2007. Camillus continued to make Duratool line of basically electrician knives and a few other knives out there, including the Pruner and stuff like that. But three knives made it into the Duratool line of knives, one of them being the knife that you most often find as a What-A-Knife, and two other knives. The What-A-Knife, or the this one, we'll call it the Workhorse, because that's what Camillus actually referred to it as. They gave it the name the Workhorse. Came with two different order numbers for it. One of them was the 326 Workhorse, and the other one was the 326 BP Workhorse, and BP stood for blister package. So it would either show up in a blister package or it'd show up as a group of knives that were either in boxes or just wrapped in paper or plastic bags. The 326 was known as the Workhorse, and the other knife that showed up in 1996 was the Journeyman, and this is the 327 Journeyman. Might have also been a 327 BP Journeyman, but I don't have the blister package for it. And as you can see, it's an electrician knife that is like the Klein tool, but instead of having brass liners and everything, everything is stainless steel throughout, and otherwise it is just a really nice electrician knife. You've got the liner lock on the screwdriver, and you have the sharpened edge down here, the unsharpened edge up there. You got the little cutout so that you can get to the nail nick on the main blade, and you got the wire stripper area there, or the choil, whatever you want to call it, and then the secondary spear master blade. And you see there, Camillus made in USA. So this is one made near the end of the Camillus run of knives, and it's a Duratool. And obviously Camillus made quite a few other electrician knives, but the Duratool ones were the ones with the stainless steel handles, and they're clearly stamped Duratool. And these two knives, the 326 and the 327, remained in the Camillus catalogs right up until at least 2006, maybe even after then, maybe right up until the very demise of the company. But it's very hard to find a Duratool 326 workhorse. The Journeyman is also dang near impossible to find. This is probably harder to find than the little Workhorse. And there was also a third Duratool that was not issued in 1996, but showed up sometime by the year 2000, and that was the Pruner. And these are even harder to find, at least if you're looking for a Duratool Pruner, because this knife has since gone on to be made by Smith & Wesson and is now currently in production with marbles. And you see what it is. It's the Duratool Pruner. And this was, the Pruner was number, 328. Okay, you might have heard the little bit of that droning sound that started at the end of the video there. I've decided to go back and reshoot the ending again because the droning noise just became louder and louder and became very annoying. But in any case, what I was talking about was the Duratool Pruner. And like I mentioned, I believe this was not part of the initial release of the knives with the metal handles. Just the 326 and 327, which were the Workhorse and the Journeyman respectively, came out initially, and then this knife showed up a few years later, and this is the 328 or the 328 BP if it was released in a blister pack. And it is basically a large hawkbill. The only difference is, like the other Duratools with the metal handles, it has a metal handle instead of the Delrin handles that were on there, so it's a much slimmer line of a knife. Now, and also, as you can tell, it has a stainless steel liner lock on there instead of a brass liner lock. You see there, Camillus, New York, USA. And typical half stop going on and everything else. And the interesting thing about the Pruner is it moved on beyond Camillus. These two knives, the metal handled Duratools by Camillus, seem not to go beyond Camillus, but the hawkbill or the Pruner actually went on into Smith & Wesson, and Smith & Wesson made two versions of it. One of them was just the hawkbill. I have it somewhere, I just cannot find it at the moment. But they also made a marlinspike version of it. As far as I know, Camillus did not make a marlinspike version of this knife. But and this marlinspike version moved over into the Colt lineup, and I believe back into the and then moved also into the Marlin lineup, but with a different take on it. We'll go over that in another video. But the Pruner also moved into the into the Marbles lineup of knives, with a little bit different finish to it and everything. And what I will do in a future video is compare the various Pruners as they progressed on, and talk a little bit more about the Marbles knives. But the Pruner, as far as I know, is the only Camillus Duratool metal handle knife that moved beyond Camillus. These two knives died with Camillus as far as I know, but the Pruner lived on in other brands. And with that said, let's move on to the slideshow. let me take just a second to thank you once again for dropping by and spending a few minutes here at Knife Chats with Tobias. I really do appreciate it, and I do appreciate any comments that you leave. So please remember to give me that thumbs up, and also don't forget to subscribe and ring that notification bell so you'll know when the next episode is up and running. Thanks again for dropping by. Really do appreciate your time here.